Alexander of Macedon by Harold Lamb. We are into Book 3. Chapter 15. The Blight of Luxury. It began with little things, with personal luxuries, hobbies, and servants. It grew imperceptibly into a conflict of personalities. Promptly, it had begun long before, during the campaign, but it became more evident during these months of occupation of Western Asia. The Macedonians, from phalanxmen to commanders, were experienced campaigners, which meant that they knew very well how to make themselves comfortable. Moreover, compared to the Eastern Greeks, the Ionians, and noble-born Egyptians and Persians, they were barbarians. They had learned only the two sciences of warfare and agriculture. Now they were learning new methods of trade and commerce. Only in exceptional cases, those of Alexandros and Peucestas, the Hephaestian, did they try to understand the mentality of the Asiatics, but almost all of them were greatly impressed by the conveniences and luxuries available at every stage. Farming here involved no such toil as in the Macedonian hills. Harvests grew as if by magic out of the seed supply, irrigation canals, and the plentiful slave labor. Alexandros' generosity had made even squadron leaders wealthy by Macedonian standards. A regimental commander could buy a village or a fleet of river barges, and Alexandros openly encouraged this form of investment in the new lands. He was not so pleased with some other ideas of the soldiers. They had developed a taste for oriental perfumes and bath scents. They liked to be rubbed down with Egyptian ointment instead of plain oil. They had acquired somehow silver basins. Alexandros noticed one officer who would have only silver nails in his saddles, and skilled Syrian masseurs. Another officer had arrangements for a special rub-down powder to be shipped regularly by camel load from Memphis. Philotas liked to go off hunting with his private coterie. Of secretaries and attendants. He had special nets made, which when set up covered half a mile of ground. By driving gazelles, boar, and lions against these nets, he could bring in a huge haul of game. On such occasion he gave banquets on a royal scale, serving imported wine, cooled with snow. Alexandros' own mess had grown, with his new staff of Magians, interpreters, and geographers, but he kept on serving simple food, and limited his steward's budget. In one of her incessant letters, Olympias complained bitterly that he was limiting his own resources while giving his lieutenants wealth enough to create followings of their own. You will find yourself destitute in the end, when you have made them equal to kings. Well, at least it won't be such a shock if it ever happens, right? Alexandros paid no attention to such advice, but he did dress down the non-coms who had taken on servants to clean their equipment and groom their horses. If the soldier can't attend to the needs of his body with his own hand, is he fit to be called a soldier? So long as they were quartered in towns, it was not easy to separate his veterans from this immense throng of servants. During such halts, the army had a way of multiplying itself, like a cattle herd, penned in good pasturage. Women produced offspring. Interpreters appeared with aged fathers who had to be cared for. Guides developed brothers. Moreover, the new Persian co-workers had large staffs of technical assistants. When the satraps of Parthia and Hyrcania came in to make formal obeisance to the new great king, they brought with them trains of counselors, physicians, stable managers, accountants, and a whole regiment of couriers. They also had wives, who also had entourages. For several centuries, these people of Asia had flocked to the person of the great king, and they did so now because Alexandros was making himself both feared and respected. They called him Iskander Shah, and divinely sent, and, unless prevented, they prostrated themselves when he stepped among them. This pressing of the head to the earth before the presence of the great king was not so much an act of servility as an act of reverence to the divine power invested in the person of their new ruler. The one person I interviewed talked about a soul exorcism. It's this Fravashi that's probably being talked about. They were bowing down to the memory of Kurush and the splendor of Ahura, Lord of the Sun, Lord of all. It was not easy to prevent them from doing this. Philotas made fun of such prostration. Alexandros tried to ridicule his followers out of a desire for so many attendants. Did they, he asked, expect others to do their thinking for them, as well as run their errands? Did they expect to keep as fit and sleep as sound as formerly? If they delegated their work routine to other men, such admonitions had little effect, partially because Alexandros' own mess had grown in the same way. What with his new Persian teachers and Hephaestion's Magians, for Hephaestion, like Alexandros, cultivated the friendship of the Persians, eating with them and trying to learn from them, while commanders like Philotas and Craterus conducted themselves as Macedonian overlords in a subjected land. It is important to remember always that Alexandros of Macedon was not setting up a Greek system in Asia. His new imperium can best be called Macedonian Persian, a world state fashioned out of the Macedonian leadership upon Persian concepts. More than that, it was something new under the sun. Modern historians have inadvertently left the impression that Alexandros established a state upon the Greek model, thereby extending Greek culture eastwards. There is little truth in that. Alexandros had studied the defects, as well as the advantages of the Greek political system at Mysa and the treaties of Isocrates, as well as in Philip's counseling, after his own experience at the two councils of Corinth, and in trying to establish Greek nationality upon the Ionian coast. He seemed to abandon any hope of carrying Greece with him into Asia. Lysippus and the other Greek artist who accompanied him had a specific duty of designing coins and engraving gems, and painting his own portraits. Aristander was not a Greek. Most of the Greeks he appointed as officials in his new provincial administration were from the Asiatic cities. He designed Alexandria in Egypt, more on the plan of Memphis or Sidona than Corinth. At Ecbatana, he sent home or allowed to go most of the Greek allied forces. The famous lighthouse at Alexandria was being designed on the model of the Tower of Halicarnassus, which seemed to have impressed Alexandros greatly. He was influenced even more profoundly by the magnificent Persian art. He sent home continually to Mysa, Pella, and Athens exhibits and specimens of all that was new in Asia. After Babylon, Magians, Zarathustrians, Indian Aryans, like Kalginas, were asked to accompany him. Only today is the significance and importance of Persian and Western Asiatic culture being recognized as Alexandros recognized it. The influence of Aristotle upon Alexandros has been made to assume to be great. The influence of Alexandros and the discoveries upon Aristotle and the Hellenic world has not yet estimated correctly. The brilliant and restless Craterus jeered at the philosophic Hephaestion, calling him Persian lover and thespian. Alexandros refused to be bothered by this personal quarrel. Hephaestion, he said, is Alexandros' friend. Craterus is the king's friend. Both are equally loyal. He said nothing at this point about Philotas. Only when he set the divisions marching into new territories could he inspect the personnel now accumulated around his commands. Disliking to order his men to rid themselves of their new appendages, he made a practice of leaving as much as possible behind at bases along the roads. Also, he threw regiments with him into arduous route marches, cutting through mountain ranges and making wide circuits to explore the country. But the army knew as well as he that there was no military necessity for such marches. Then Alexandros encouraged the officers to go after the more dangerous kind of game. The Asiatics shared in this love of hazardous hunting. Alexandros often dismounted to go after lions on foot with a short spear, which was far from being a safe pastime. A Spartan hostage, he had been an envoy to the great former king. Watching Alexandros in one of these encounters, remarked sarcastically, "I find it hard to say which of the two is the more majestic brute." Craterus, who was suffering from fever, ridiculed the lion-hunting project more subtly. He summoned Lysippus, after one lion had been killed, to make a quick model of the group. With the lion going for Alexandros and Craterus, killing the lion, cast it in life-size bronze, he urged the sculptor, and set it up on a pedestal to mark the spot where Alexandros slew the king of beasts. This was in Hyrcania, on the shore of the Caspian, where lions, tigers, and wild buffalo abounded in the forest. The Macedonians had set up such statues of soldiers as memorials after the early battles. No, Alexandros corrected. Send the group back to the Delphic shrine as a thank offering. Craterus had nothing to say to that. Again, Alexandros heard in the table talk that Peucestus, one of the Persian favorers, had been badly bitten by a bear during a hunt. At once he dictated a sharp remonstrance to that officer, asking why Peucestus had not informed him of the wound and giving him advice how to treat it. With the purge of Hellebore, he realized that he was losing touch with the personal problems of his officers. Except for the regiments actually serving under the king, the Macedonian units were not scattered along the communications of an area more than 650,000 square miles, even with the new courier post system, over the fine imperial roads, such as the King's Way. It took nearly 2 months for a letter from Alexandros' advanced headquarters to reach Alexandria in Egypt. Staff officers were widely separated at bases like Tur, Babylon, Ecbatana, and Ray. With them, the Macedonian leader tried to keep in touch by courier dispatch, but sheer distance made it impossible to maintain liaison with the now coast region. He had to draw his active commands eastward as he advanced. The full weight of responsibility fell on one man. Of the great problems of supply in meeting these, he had to calculate the seasonal yield of harvests. Grazing ahead as well as behind him were now added the nagging perplexities of a dual administration of these vast provinces. Since he had appointed Macedonian officers to work with the Persian satraps, he had to smooth out inevitable differences between them. Philotas, for example, saw only catastrophe in trying to put the civil administration in the rear areas on the same authority as the military. As commander of the Macedonian cavalry spearhead, he refused point blank to cooperate with the civil governor in guarding merchants' caravans. Are we rulers of these lands or servants of these peoples? He asked his intimates contemptuously. Alexandros was obdurate on the point of protecting civilians. He went out of his way to make clear that this was not a conquest, but a reconstruction of the world state of the great kings. He had ordered in detail the ceremonious funeral for the body of Dariush at Persepolis. The young sons of Dariush he kept with him, supervising their education with the help of the mother of Dariush, teaching them Greek as well as military discipline. To even read the mass of travel orders and routine reports coming in from the new base camps required many hours of the night, but Alexandros tried to do it in one order for an average veteran. Yoloakos of Aga to be enrolled as a physically disabled and sent home. He questioned the reason for it. He was told Yoloakos did not appear to be disabled, but he wanted to go back. Alexandros sent for the soldier. The veteran Yoloakos admitted he was well enough, admitted that his real reason for putting in for a sick leave was that he had left a girl back in a coast port, a girl named Telesipa. You left her. Then who does she belong to? Nobody. She's a free prostitute. She'll go home with me. Telesipa will. See, dude doesn't even know. And let me remind you that in a lot of cultures, girlfriend, prostitute, same thing. The commander wrote a few words on the order. If the girl, Telesipa, will accompany the veteran Eurolakos, of her own free will, permit the two to return to Macedon. If not, return the veteran to duty. Only officers, like Hephaestion and Peucestus, had any sympathy with Alexandros' insistence that the women of the Asiatics should be treated like the wives of the Macedonians. The Macedonians had understood well enough the Greek code affecting women that wives should be secluded and do the work, while the prostitute class were the free companions of all comers. But here, the only promiscuous women were in the lower slave class. Other women, although partially secluded, were to be treated as wives and daughters, and could make complaints, even against Macedonian officers, if abused. Alexandros insisted on it. If his Macedonians were to live with the Asiatics, the women would have to be treated as they were treated before the invasion. But now he was showing more strain under the labor of administration than during the campaign. Sleeping less than before, he formed the habit of sitting over wine with his intimates during the early hours of the morning, and still waking for the sunrise sacrifice and breakfast consultation. When he overslept now, he would lie unconscious for 36 hours. He drank more heavily, often bathing afterwards, before turning in. Moreover, in his anxiety to get through the routine, which he refused to neglect, he showed increasing impatience. Statements to him had to be hurried through. He snapped at objections. Those around him developed the habit of saying only what might please him, for to disagree with him would arouse his anger. It was not that he relished flattery, but he listened most readily to the praise of his actions, and those who had honest censorship to voice often remained silent, to his disadvantage. Because remember, in most situations, silence and the lack of resisting is consent. So, speak up. Have your way now.